Welcome everybody to another episode of Racquet Society. Today we have Göksu from Istanbul, a jazz musician, joining us. And it is very good coincidence that today is actually International Jazz Day, on which we have a very jazz-filled playlist. Um, so Ece, tell us about your list. It's not only jazz you have there, of course, but tell us a little bit about why you chose these tracks and what drew you to them. Yeah, take it away.
Okay, well, hi, hello, first of all. Thank you so much for having me. And before I talk about my list, I have a question for you guys. Do I get the sweatshirt? I do?
We'll get your address and you can we'll put it in the mail. We already sent one to London, so you'll be our second international shipment. I guess you're our maybe third international guest because Tim technically is from Australia. So we're working our way around the globe, which is fun.
Great, because I loved it. I loved the design, and also I'm a tennis fan and your fan, so.
Amazing.
Okay, thank you. Well, my list is, I think, is a fusion of both classical music and jazz and some folk music, I guess, with some Paul Simon and Bob Dylan in it. Where should I start? The jazz part is, who do I have? Let me check. The singers that I chose for you are Carmen McRae and Shirley Horn. They're both two amazing jazz vocalists slash pianists, actually. They're incredible pianists as well as incredible singers. And right now I'm working on a dissertation and I'm writing about them. So I'm listening so much of their music, and that's why they had to be there. They had to be in the list. Other than that, should I just go through the list?
Yeah, since you started already with Carmen McRae and Shirley Horn, why don't we just talk about those? I actually haven't heard these tracks before, so both of them were new for me. And I have one question for you, Ece.
I hope I know the answer.
You're also, of course, a singer and a pianist at the same time. But what's interesting about the Carmen McRae one is that she sings Monk in the whole of the CD, right? It's a whole CD of Monk.
Right.
Actually, as a singer to sing Monk, because Monk is not the most singable jazz musician at all. In fact, the opposite of that. It's so angular and jumpy and all of that. So, what do you think is interesting about singing Monk?
Right. Well, I totally agree. It's pretty difficult to sing Monk, actually. It's pretty difficult to sound like his music. Well, Carmen does that amazing. I don't know if you like the album, but she's an incredible interpreter of Monk, actually. Well, for me, it's very difficult to sing Monk because of his harmonic approach, actually. Because I am more of a linear thinking person, more melody person. His harmonies are pretty difficult, and his style and his he is different, like as a human being also. So it's not easy, but we love challenges. So so we're trying to do our best. But I think that album, that Carmen Sings Monk album, is one of the best Monk albums ever, like recorded studio recording. I mean.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's super interesting. Both of these singers, it's interesting that they're very good pianists because I think at least my friends who are piano players, they seem to have a really strong connection to their inner ear from maybe playing an instrument at such a young age that's so complex. And I think that gives them the ability to sing these very difficult harmonies more easily or something. Like they can hear it maybe more easily than somebody else might be able to, because yeah, like a lot of the time you have to find a melodic tone that maybe is like an extension of a chord or something. And it's one thing to like find the tone, it's another thing to sing it in tune. And these two musicians are like virtuosos in that regard. I mean, the way that they find every pitch that they're singing, and in these, you know, recordings which are super intimate and really foreground the performance, the way that they can do that live or in this session with these kind of, you know, close mics and, you know, very little audio production is even more just like incredible to me. And I found that I really enjoyed that a lot about this whole playlist, was that it's a lot about just the intimacy of performance. And a lot of music I've been listening to lately is very highly produced, you know. It's kind of a expression of like the studio, and this is like an expression of someone's humanity and the way that they perform and the skills that they have. And I, it was very refreshing, and I didn't know I needed it until I listened to this playlist, which, you know, is very like ballad heavy and really good for like, I don't know, this pandemic moment where we're spending a lot of time. It's like living room music. It feels really good to listen to at home.
Cozy, right? Yeah, that's what I feel right now. Actually, for the last um, last year, I guess. That's what I mean. The music that I listen to is very acoustic, and I really enjoy hearing human voice. And I figured out, I remembered that I really missed listening to classical piano, but only classical piano. So yeah, that's how I feel too. Very cozy, and it's a safe place to be. Where
So I have a question about the Shirley Horn piece. Is she the pianist in that?
no, well, that is the only studio album that she does not accompany herself.
Okay.
Ahmet Cemal is the pianist there.
Okay, that explains everything immediately, because the minute it started, I was like, who is this pianist? This is just amazing. And Ahmet Jamal happens to be one of my absolute favorite pianists.
Yeah, that is her last studio album, and she wasn't able to accompany herself because of some health issues.
Okay.
And as a sub, they called Ahmet Cemal, and he came and played for her.
How nice
And
to have.
Yeah,
the composer of this song is actually from St. Louis, which I just discovered, which was very interesting, which is where I live.
Gordon Jenkins.
Yeah, it said he's from Webster Groves, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's interesting.
Fascinating.
didn't know that.
Is there a big jazz scene there?
Well, the jazz history, I mean, Miles Davis, Scott Joplin. I mean, you have rock and roll history like Chuck Berry, Tina Turner. I mean, there's an amazing history of music in St. Louis and jazz. And used to be quite a big, I mean, there is actually a really great jazz scene still, but there was a very big jazz scene in the, you know, 60s and 70s in certain parts of the city.
Oh, I didn't know that. Awesome. And yeah, so this is one of her last albums, you say?
Yeah, it is her last studio album, but I think she has a couple of more live albums after that. But it's a very nice. I love that album. Roy Hargrove's in it. I know, Sizzy, you love Roy Hargrove too. And it's a very nice album. Did you have time to listen all the album or just the track?
I didn't listen to the whole album yet, but I will actually. I listened repeatedly to this one because I really liked it. Sort of kind of going back to what you were saying, that there's this intimacy, but this kind of, you know, the authority that comes to some of these kind of like older, wiser performers. Like, this is how I'm gonna say it and no other way. And it will be very kind of plain, but I will hit it just right. I think that's basically how she sings it. And I was just thinking, like, how does one get to that point? How do you actually get to sing like this? Like, she's almost kind of mixing it a little bit with speaking, but it's just amazing, really, because the whatever it is, that the expression that she wants to actually express through it, comes through perfectly with the minimal amount of effort. And I would say that this is exactly what Ahmet Cemal does with the piano playing as well. It's like nothing is excessive, everything is there just because it needs to be there. I love that economy of performance very much.
Right. Well, both Shirley Horn and Carmen McRae, for me, I mean, they're great storytellers. I mean, whatever they say, they mean it so
Exactly.
hardly and so sincerely
Right.
that it just happens. I mean, you just imagine everything beyond.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, love it. Love it very much. What about the first track on the list, actually? This is not an opera I knew, I have to say. I had to look it up. I didn't know it before. So that's why it is totally new to me. Tell us something about that, Ece.
Oh, I'm not very much familiar with the opera, the entire opera. I know that the composer is Italian, Cilea, and this is one of his most foremost like popular works, Adriana Lecouvreur. Um, I heard this aria, Io so lumile ancella, when I was very young, actually. And I was mesmerized by Callas's sound. I mean, she's so amazing all the time. But this music, like, blew my mind. That impressionist vibes, because I never heard I heard Italian opera many times. I'm very familiar with it. Uh, but Impressionism in opera is not something that I can combine in my head. So I just loved it, and this aria became my favorite soprano arias of all times, with Maria Callas, of course.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And I just love actually just the sound of this recording, especially the instruments and like the strings and things like this in the opening, which doesn't right away give away actually that it's an opera recording. It could be early 20th century cinema. It could be from a jazz recording. And I kind of like that it sets the stage for this playlist of all of these ballads that have a lot of heavy instrumentation. A lot of them, like I'm thinking like later on in the Paul Simon, where the personnel list is like, I don't know, 30 people or something on that record. And um, the I agree with you on the impressionistic sound as well, which is such an interesting moment in music history in which these composers are kind of, I mean, I'm thinking of the Ravel on this playlist as well, where they're looking really far back to like sort of classic sort of things, and then looking sort of incorporating new elements, which many of them are like jazz, like these elements of melodic voicing where your, you know, cadences have like falling thirds and flat seven type of things rather than, you know, leading tones. And you know, and it's such a interesting moment. And in, I don't know, I think about it in like American cinema and stuff like that, this kind of quality of sound is so present now that it feels uh like a mother tongue or something, like this, the language of this music is but yeah, super interesting and super beautiful, and has this interesting cross section with all these other kinds of things, which is surprising for this little aria from this opera that many people don't know, that it could kind of point to all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of like a risky kind of like singing, which I really like a lot too. Like how she kind of like goes for the last pitch. It's just like, I'm gonna go for it. And then she locks it in and just so beautiful.
Right. Also dynamically too. It's all very piano. Everything is always piano. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
To not be forceful and still make it there in this silky kind of way, it's really quite lovely actually. Yeah.
Yeah. That's Callas. She's the diva of the divas.
That's a reminding.
Amazing singer.
Yeah. And then Ravel, of course, what can I say? That particular recording is the recording for me from which I learned this piece actually and fell in love with. And
Oh yeah.
and eventually played with the orchestra. And when the second movement came during the rehearsals, that was just heaven. I thought I was in heaven, basically. I mean, there's nothing better than this music, is there, really? I mean, it's the best,
No,
like all Bill Evans is playing is this, basically. This is where it comes from, it feels like. Tell us why you picked it.
it's a hard question actually. Um, why I picked Michelangelo, maybe I can try to explain.
Yeah,
Um, because Ravel is Ravel. I mean, I don't know what to say about his music and especially the second movement of that concerto. So Michelangelo, he's playing piano like he's a jazz musician. I mean, I don't know how I can explain, but he's playing that written notation like he's improvising.
very much so. Yeah.
And this concerto is very um, suitable for that, I guess, for that approach. And that's why it is in a very different place for me. I mean, there are many great interpretations of the concerto. I love the Argeri version. I love Sokolov version. There are many, but this one is somewhere
Yeah.
else. It's like heaven, as you said.
Yeah, I actually, even though, I mean, you know how back in the days when we only had CDs, we used to listen to the ones we owned so many times because, they were expensive. You bought one, you just devoured it basically when you bought it.
Right.
This was one of those for me. So I even kind of like recognized the little mic noises and so on. Like I know it so well, basically. But the thing that I sort of was reminded about listening to it again was how he's playing the like introduction where he's playing alone almost absolutely asynchronously. The hands are actually asynchronous the whole time. He's never bringing them down exactly at the same time. They are very close to each other, but they're always like that, which is a very 19th century performance practice thing, actually. If you listen to old pianist recordings, you hear them doing it everywhere. It's really
Mhm.
interesting that he does it here because by the time this piece was recorded, this is very dorky information, but at that point, people were not doing this for reasons of sort of reacting to the world wars, thinking we should be a little bit more austere, only do what is written on the page, not kind of like mess with it, etc. But obviously, he's just like, forget about that. I'm gonna do whatever I want here, and then it brings him back more to the 19th century way of playing it, actually, which is also interesting. He doesn't do it as much when the orchestra comes in, but he does it a lot at the beginning. Then makes it
Mm.
all more jazzy, perhaps too, right? Because the hands are never quite together.
Yeah, I remember talking about this subject with you, Suzy, before about Schumann performances. It just clicked to me right
With
today, right now.
subject, I did so much research about this that I know that for a very, very long time, people kept doing that actually into the 20th century. Because, I mean, the beginning of the recording history is filled with this. It
Right.
really kind of like stops with like cut with a knife, basically right after the Second World War. They're basically just like, we're not doing that anymore. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. It's a movement, but yeah, sort of like, yeah, he seems to have ignored this. Like, I'm not going to do this thing that everybody's doing now, which is kind of like a colder, more distant kind of way of performing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And and
And
then,
I love the way he looked.
of course, just
So cool.
the king, like
Right?
recording where he's wearing a belt over his sweater. Who does that? But even that, everything looks good. He is the king. He is the king.
Primo. The primo and the prima are in my list. Callas and Michelangelo.
So many amazing people here. I mean, what can I say about the next pianist? Who happens to be my most favorite living pianist, as you know. So Ece and I listened to him live in New York, actually, Chris. And
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, when did you meet each other? How do you know each other? I'm super curious about this.
Oh, long time ago.
I can't even remember anymore. I think like Ece must have been like 8 or something when I met her.
Wow.
So
Yes, I mean, we're very old and very close friends.
that's right. That's why many things on this list that I don't know if I love it because she loves it or she loves it because I love it at this point.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, it's amazing. It's super interesting. I had no idea that you had known each other for that long, or that you had met when you were like that young. That's incredible, and that's super cool that you're both, still musicians. And I'm assuming maybe you studied at music school together and stuff like that when you were young. And yeah, incredible.
We did actually, yes. We went to conservatory together,
Yeah.
and then she moved away from Ankara. She went to where was your first stop, Sizzy? Germany?
Germany. And then when I came to the US, at some point, Ece came to the US as well. So we reunited.
Yeah.
But yes, Brad Meldau. So tell us
Brad
about.
Meldau. Brad Meldau. Well, I didn't know that he released a brand new album last year. Actually, I recently discovered it, and all those tracks are very short,
Yeah.
for 2 minutes, 3 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think about it? I don't know.
Chris,
About that strategy, actually. That
Chris, do you know that album?
I don't know it. And this is a Billy Joel song.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's a lot of interest, I think, in updating kind of like the American songbook, right? Like people recording more contemporary great songs, and those songs are probably shorter. I mean, maybe they don't have the same, but there isn't. That would mean that there's probably not extended improvisation or other kinds of things, maybe in these tracks if they're really short. But I don't know why an artist would choose to make really short tracks right now. It's a very good question.
I think he actually did it in the first month. I remember when it was released, and it just came out like in June or something. It was like the COVID happened, and then pretty much like 1.5 months later, he brought that out. And it was sort of like his way of coming to terms with it. Because I know this, I think because he actually performed it live in Concertgebouw. Chris, remember I sent you that link, and then he played it live, and either before it he talked about it, or there was a text that actually came with it. That's why I know about this. And these are all pieces that he basically wrote in that period. They were not there before, or like he just made a cover of Billy Joel's song, whatever. But I've been listening to it a lot too, and the fact that they are shorter just makes me want to kind of like have the score of this so that I can teach it to my students because they are wonderful pieces. I love them. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that I like a lot there.
Yeah. All the songs are his originals, I guess, in the album, except for this Billy Joel, and there's one more thing at the end.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's that says something like remembering how it was or something. That's the one that I love so much. Um,
Oh,
very much like it makes it extremely clear that he has classical background in piano playing, basically, which is always clear with Brad Maldo anyway, but maybe one of the reasons why I like playing so much. But I like it a lot.
I like the song too. I always sing in my sing in good old days. I mean, I used to sing the song "New York State of Mind." It's a nice Billy Joel song, and also I miss kind of New York a little bit right now. So I thought it was a nice solo piano version of a nice song. So that's why it was in.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome.
I wonder if you both could compare this to, say, like the Rameau recording. I'm like super curious how, as piano players, you hear this, because the Rameau recording to me has this like very specific like Deutsche Grammophon
Sound, right?
sound that has actually maybe been updated more recently to have this kind of like, well, I can talk more about it in a second, but I'm like super curious as piano players how you hear an artist like Brad Meldau's engineering and his playing versus this like Deutsche Grammophon kind of classical engineering and Olafsson's playing.
I sort of have the feeling that the Olafsson recording, or like you were saying, it seems like Deutsche Grammophon sort of embraced this new close miking that they didn't used to do before, which we normally associate with pop music, don't we? It's the mic is really, really close on your face, which sort of captures how energetic and like bubbly his playing is, which is lovely. I mean, I love that playing here very much. I love him in general anyway, and what he has been doing lately. But yeah, that's quite different than how classical piano used to be recorded, right? You could say that even with Michelangelo's recording, it's pretty far. I mean, that's of course very old, etc., and there's an orchestra involved, so it's much more complicated, obviously, than recording just the solo piano. But yeah, it's to me it just seems like it's a lot more on your face or in your ear, right? Much more of a poppy kind of way of recording the piano is
But
what
I guess that crispness of his touche, it's very brilliant, and you know what I mean. I think that comes from that close microphoning, tuning, whatever you call it. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, seems to be. Yeah, it really kind of like catches the energy of the attack very much, right?
Right. No time for sustain, but
Exactly.
right there.
Right there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Suits.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating. I
Yeah.
mean, it
What?
definitely sounds close mic'd, which I would say, yes, definitely sounds like a lot of current popular music. And I don't know the history of jazz piano recording, but I would assume that jazz piano would have been recorded more closely mic'd than classical because the ensembles are smaller and the records are maybe solo or something versus an orchestra or something, of course, which there's more distance. But I also get the sense that, and I've talked to people about this, that he's playing very softly and that they're just basically close miking, soft playing, and turning it up really loud or something, or like making it very present through like engineering, um, or maybe even like rolling off a lot of the high frequency to make it feel. Do you know the composer Max Richter?
Of course.
He's
No,
also
I
a
don't.
Deutsche Grammophon artist, and he also uses a lot of piano recordings like this where he just completely like eliminates all the high frequencies in some of his recordings of the piano. And his he has like an aesthetic reason, which is that he thinks that that's like how we heard sound when we were in the womb, and it's like has this like thing in our memory that's like very comforting to hear only like this certain register of frequencies that like you would hear if you were underwater or something. And I think there is something to that in these recordings. They like touch on something that's more deep in our like DNA and memory than than I can even express. But they have this quality that's hard to explain that like just immediately goes to the core sonically. And I feel like it has something to do with that, like avoiding the harshness of like any kind of upper register, like harsh attack, or which is strange. You'd think it would be the opposite of doing something really close mic'd, but I don't recall any moments in which it's like really, really like, you know, the piano can be a very percussive and piercing instrument. I don't recall any moments in which that ever happens in these recordings.
Yeah, you're right. That's quite like it's engineered. It can't be like that if it is that close. Like there's quite a bit of kind of playing with frequencies, etc. I bet. And yeah, I mean really good recordings of solo or small ensemble jazz piano recordings. Not the super old ones because it seems like they couldn't choose, like in just some whatever club it was just recorded, like in the Bill Evans recordings, etc. There can be a lot of ambient noise, etc. But like more closer ones, like think of course ECM again, like with all the Kitcher recordings that came from like ECM. Also close mic, quite close mic'd actually, and super crystal clear, right? I would say that's also their sound aesthetic, or maybe they sort of like introduced it anyway.
Yeah, probably. Well, I never thought about this actually while I was listening to his albums, Vikinger's albums. Uh, but maybe that is the reason his Debussy's did not get that much of my attention than his Rameau's.
Same for me.
Yeah, because Debussy needs place, you know, it needs sustain, it needs it's a different atmosphere. But the Ramos are, I found them pretty good actually.
And Flip Glass.
And Philip Glass,
That's also,
yes,
yeah. That's his stuff. He really does that well, I think.
yeah.
And we have actually two artists here on your list that I have to say it's almost like a confession that I have, because I know a lot of people in this world and I don't. One of them is Maria Schneider's orchestra. I do not love it very much. Like the sort of music they make is not my cup of tea, or the sort of orchestration and repertoire she chooses, but I love this track. I really like this one very much. This is like the best Maria Schneider track I heard for me. And the other one, I think like I could be stoned for saying this out loud, is Bob Dylan. I just cannot totally get into music that is 95% about lyrics, basically. I'm just like, where's the music here? I want
Oh.
this. And I know this is very, very horrible of me to say.
It's
Make
interesting
me
that you brought these two people up, though, because I think of these two tracks as being very similar on this playlist, in that they're very hypnotic, and that the goal of them is to like hypnotize you in a way. And I feel that way about Bob. I think that's what Bob Dylan, to me, the storytelling and the way that he can hypnotize you into getting into the world of those lyrics with music by changing, like repeating short phrases, changing the lengths of phrases. It's like very sleight of hand. You don't even know it's happening. And then all of a sudden, it's like every time you get to the refrain of the chorus, it feels like this amazing outpouring, because of the way that he repeats these things. And he gets you sort of on this wavelength, and then he cuts it off and goes to this like longer melody. To me, that's like compositional gold. But I think Maria Schneider does as well. And it actually kind of reminds me of like early 2000s Bjork, like the soundtrack she did with Lars von Trier for Dancer in the Dark.
in the dark.
Has this just this hypnotic quality, plus, again, I mean, and maybe it's just like the like flat six in a major key or something, or but then there's like this additional quality that she adds of these incredible musicians that she always has in her orchestra that are just free to basically like improvise on top of these really hypnotic progressions, which it's a different kind of goal. But I do know where you're coming from, Stacey. I've gone back and forth on the Maria Schneider orchestra, but I've come around on it actually, that there's something very special about the hypnosis of it.
Yeah, perhaps. AJ?
Well, your Susie, your speech about Maria Schneider was like you were. It was like me talking, actually. I totally agree in every word you say. But this last album, which I haven't heard yet, and I'm not even sure if it's out or not, Data Lords. Um, it's really different. I think it has two different CDs in it, and one all originals by her, and one CD is about the digital world, and the other one is about the natural world.
Oh, okay.
So it's the Data Lords, and um, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. It got my attention somehow, and I love that song, Sputnik. It's interesting, and I listened to it from the very beginning to the very end, and it was a first for me when it comes to Schneider. So, so I found it interesting. I don't know, but about Bob Dylan, well, he's one of my favorite songwriters. Um, his music for me is like listening to T.S. Eliot or a Rimbaud or an Ezra Pound with some folk music underneath. Like
Yeah,
it's very poetic, and I love listening to those lyrics with that simplicity in music.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Did I make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. I always see that as a kind of like deficit in me,
Oh,
the instrumentalist. I'm just like, tell me more about the actual music. Because I always sort of like think that music could very easily be without the lyrics. So that I want always that part to be kind of like more strongly present, basically. But yes, I think it's a shortcoming of mine, you know. So I should kind of listen to what you two said and then revisit it again, I think.
Well, then you have like the exact opposite in the Paul Simon, which is just like insanely harmonically rich and complex, and the melody, like you just can't even believe that someone can write a tune that good while using all of these complex harmonies like underneath it and weave it all together. It's like mind-boggling, you know.
It is. It's awesome, that album. No, I did listen to the whole album last night, actually. I was like, I can't stop here. I have to listen to this whole thing. It's just amazing. He could
It's
like
so good.
20 songs out. There's going on. Like what part are we in? Like D part, like, and then E part. So it keeps going on. It's amazing. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Yes, that's a great album. Both that song, Still Crazy After All These Years, and 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover.
Of course, that's very, very good.
Perfetto.
It's really just great.
Love that album. Did you know this Portuguese singer I put on the list?
No,
Salvador Sobral.
very, very lovely. I didn't know it, and great. Yeah, you always have a couple of those in your pocket, Ece, actually. You always surprise me from the Portuguese angle. Oh,
I started taking Portuguese lessons now.
finally, okay.
Finally. Well, the reason for that is to be able to sing in Portuguese, those bossa novas and sambas. That is why. But, anyways, Salvador Sobral he was the winner of the Eurovision Song Contest, Sizzy. Chris, are you aware of the Eurovision Song Quest?
I'm aware of it, but I think this is like international people asking them if they're aware of like the Super Bowl. It's like a thing that
Right.
happens in the United States that only Americans care about. And this is something that happens like in Europe plus that only they care about, but they really care about it. And
We used to care about it a lot, but we don't anymore. I mean, I don't even know if still exists, actually.
Still exists, but yeah, we are not paying attention. The thing is that when we were growing up, when there was only one television channel, which was the state channel,
Hmm.
that was the thing. That was the big thing, that everyone was
Right.
at. And later on, when I studied in Germany, I had Icelandic friends. Oh my God, how crazy they were about this. They were just like, oh, in years 87, you entered with that. What? Greek people at Cornell were actually my. I kept hearing this do 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 kind of ending from the wall. I was just like, is he listening to Eurovision songs? Listening to Eurovision songs. Yes, it's this very strange thing that people can be really crazy about. Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
is there a country that like traditionally dominates the Eurovision like songwriting contest?
I don't know.
Did the Irish have won it a lot.
Wow,
Is it really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't know it.
amazing.
Which, for many, many years, actually, people used to enter it with songs that were written in their own mother tongue. And after seeing, I suppose, so many victories going to the English speaking countries, they sort of like left it behind. And now pretty much everybody sings actually in English, regardless of where they come from. So it was sort of more interesting before, I think, because you were hearing suddenly all these languages you never listened to,
Yeah.
it's a bit more, yeah, now, but it used to be something. So he won the competition. Wow. So they actually made someone proper like win the competition. That's nice.
With that song, without singing in English.
Ah, good for him.
Yeah, but isn't it a beautiful song?
Very, I like it a lot.
It's very touching and very romantic, and I just loved it the moment I heard it. It means love for two. Because I'm taking Portuguese lessons, I have to tell you the translation. If you want, I can read the title to you too.
Well done.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate me, please.
There is something
Very-
about music that's sung in Portuguese, though. I mean, I love Bebel Gilberto and Astrid Gilberto, and I mean, there's so much amazing music that from Brazil, and
yeah,
yeah, good stuff.
it just really fits the music there. Well, thank you so much for this lovely list. Oh, wait a second. There is one more. How can I forget it? You should tell us something about that, Chris, because I basically heard this song so many times. I love it, obviously. But what did you think of that?
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I love the. I mean, I love the vocal solo or the vocalizations towards the end, which are amazing and beautiful. And I love the tune of this song. Just the melody is like has this like a lot of the melodies I really love. They have like this kind of motivic, like almost like folk. It sounds like it could be like a folk tune from somewhere, you know, in the way that it's like has a repeated note with this like interesting rhythmic quality. But I want to ask, like, what's the story behind this piece, and like, where did you record it? Like, who are the people on the recording? And I didn't even look what year you released this, but I suppose I could look that up fairly easily. But yeah, I wonder if you could just give us like background on this, because we rarely get to talk to an artist about the music they're making, which is also really fun.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was released in 2012, actually. I can't believe that. The song that Mavilim is what you think about it is correct, actually, Chris. It's an old traditional folk song.
Ah.
It's an anonymous song, actually. Not the composer or the songwriter is not known. That repeating notes of the melody is, I mean, that kind of melodies are easily rearrangeable and it's very suitable for jazz, I guess. So I knew the song from years before, and we just tried some new things on it, and it came up to be a nice arrangement, actually. So we put it on the recording, and I really like the song too, actually. That album, I worked with great musicians. It's a crowded crew, though. I don't want to bore you with all the names.
We need to give credit to the pianist, who is, of course, very good.
Yes, I mean, they're all great. John Chankaya was on the piano. Scott Kohlberg was on the bass. He flew all the way from New York to Istanbul for the recording. And Mehmet Ikiz is a drummer, lives in Stockholm for decades. He was on the drums, and there was a great horn set up, actually, Imer Demirer. Who else was there? It's been 10 years, wait. Bulut Gülen was on the trombone, and Engin Recepoğlu was on the tenor saxophone, yes. I hope I'm not missing anyone.
Recorded in Istanbul. That's really cool.
Yeah, we recorded in Istanbul.
And what is the like jazz scene like there?
Actually, it's pretty nice. Well, it's been dead for the last 1.5 years, of course. But it's nice. There's a young generation who is very much interested in hearing jazz. There are not many clubs. There are only a few, like 5, 6, I guess. There is the jazz festival of Istanbul Jazz Festival, and a couple of more international jazz festivals. So it's nice. It's nice.
think that, like, considering other cities of that size, I mean, Istanbul is of course gigantic, but still, considering it as a kind of like big city, I think what it offers on jazz is quite a lot. You know,
Yeah.
there's like constant kind of like guests coming through, and then a couple of like big festivals that bring kind of like to super famous people basically. So generations of people have been fed extremely high quality jazz music. Just the fact that it's also close to Europe, whoever is coming through to the festivals there also sort of like comes through Turkey. So I,
Hmm.
one thing that I always observe is that when you go to jazz festivals or clubs, etc., you see much younger people listening to jazz in Turkey in comparison to who listens to jazz here in the US, for example. That's nice, I think, you know, that like the young generation actually somehow all this activity kind of like got the attention of the younger generation. So most of the people who listen to really kind of indie sort of like interesting kind of like electronic music or whatever kind of like popular music that's going on that's of high caliber usually also listens to jazz. That usually in Turkey is a combo. uh,
Correct. Yeah, that's true.
the profile of a listener usually includes that, which was a huge surprise to me when I came to the US, but because I expected it to be like that here too. But here, those audiences are separate, which is too bad, I think. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, the jazz audience is kind of like the classical audience. It's sort of become kind of niche and uh, specific to people that are enthusiasts of kind of one, almost one genre of music. But that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping to join Sazy in the trip to Turkey next summer.
Yes.
So
Yes,
I'm going to
please
see
do
it.
come.
I
Yeah, that would be great.
the jazz, everything.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you for being our guest, Ece. That was lovely.
Thank you so much for having me, and so good to meet you, Chris.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye bye.